All right, folks. Hi there. I'm Stapczynski. I run Asia energy coverage at Bloomberg News. Thank you for joining us on this panel today, driving carbon reduction and net zero goals through cross-sector partnerships. The energy transition is complex, challenging, and far-reaching. Consequences and responsibilities for the global energy value chain, governments, industries, and organizations, especially for energy consumers and greenhouse gas emitters. Today, we've brought together an illustrious group of experts that can provide some insight into what it takes to work together and drive down carbon emissions, especially in the emerging world where the challenge is quite high. I'll give a quick introduction, just name and title for everyone here. We have to my left Mansi, who is the chairman of Shell Group of Companies in India. We've got Charlie, the CEO of the Global Impact Coalition. We have Deepak, the president for India and Schneider Electric. And we've got Priyantha, the senior director for energy at the Asia Development Bank. I'm going to just kick it off. We've got 5 panelists in 45 minutes, so let's go. I'm going to start with Mansi. Mansi, could you please, in what, the cross-sector partnership, you always look to try to enhance efficiency and effectiveness for the energy transition. Can you just name some initiatives that kind of hit at that theme within Shell?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen, and very good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure you've joined the panel means that you're really keen in seeing how do we cross-collaborate, and I'm looking forward to seeing more opportunities to collaborate with the people in the room over here. I think going to your question, Stephen, specifically for a company which is in the energy transition, it is absolutely imperative that we will not be able to do this alone. And I think that's where the whole string of collaboration comes in life for us every single day. Yeah, and I think just to hit some big examples which illustrate how we are collaborating. So India is an emerging market, as you know, and we have been on this whole journey of growth. And our upstream positions have only been adding to the whole ecosystem. And for the first time, we had the opportunity now to decommission one of our aging upstream assets, which is a joint venture between Reliance, Shell, and ONGC. And you can see already very interesting, there's an Indian partner, there's an international company, and then there's the government OMC over there. And I think as we got into that whole process to say, how do we decommission, ensuring that we all are on the same page in terms of the end output, our vision as related to not only to the cost, but the kind of work which we need to do. Also, then we went out and thought that it has to be done made in India. So we brought in an Indian supplier, L&T, into the mix to ensure that everything comes to life. And what I'm really proud about is the initial parameters on, say, cost or safety came in much faster. But I think the elements on saying, how do we ensure that 97% of everything which gets produced through this decommissioning is recycled within the country, which is first of its kind. Also alignment with all the stakeholders. So I think the kind of challenges which comes through it, but ensuring that we get the best minds to work on it on one side of the story. And then I think if you go through the whole journey of what we do with our digital ecosystem partnerships with likes of NVIDIA, Microsoft, Intel, a whole host of innovation which is happening in the country, how do we collaborate with them? And Shell has invested close to 7 big startups through a program where we look at 40 different innovation cycles, over the last couple of years. And then, on the last end of the streams to actually collaborate with our institutes, our education institutes, like IITs, technology centers, and also going on with the government to say how do we impact lives through programs of our CSR, right? So I think the spectrum on the collaboration from upstream, downstream, innovation, as well as on what we can do to impact the community is something which we pride about. But I think the underlying fact is we can't do it alone, and it has to be done through a very strong partnership.
I just want to follow up on that. What is the importance of bringing in the community here? Why is that such a key aspect of what you're doing?
I guess two things. One is the philosophy with which we operate, because I think if you don't impact the net community, whatever money you may gain or whatever else you may do is meaningless, right? Because I think that's where you have to take the community with you. So that's a more value system and philosophical part of the company. But I think at the heart of it, wherever we operate, if we don't have the people enabled, empowered, you don't progress. And that's the harsh reality. So for example, Hazira, where we have a regasification asset, it's a 5 MMTPA asset. And we do a lot of work in outreach over there to ensure that the local community has the skill sets, because ultimately we'll be employing a lot of people back into that asset. Likewise, I think if the people over there don't get good agriculture, water, I think we do feel responsible that if we have put in a steel over there, we are equally responsible for the people who will be there. So it's a little bit of those both, which is philosophy as well as a real need along the way.
Thank you. Let's go to Deepak from Schneider Electric. I think we can now look at technology, right? As a technology provider, could you just kind of elaborate on some of your practical examples where collaborative partnerships have resulted in a success on your end?
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. So I think Mansi already said a lot. I think I want to step back and say, what are we trying to achieve? With all the growth potentials we see in multiple sectors in the country, there's one common theme behind is the energy. Now, what we need is to fulfill the growth, we need energy. And the commitment, and I think the government has been very, very bullish here that the next phase of the growth should come primarily from non-fossil. So what we're trying to achieve is how do we build the future which is more sustainable, more greener. Now, having said that, what we do is to say how do we decarbonize with the technologies we can use on the demand side. While there's a supply side equation, there's a demand supply equation. So when you do these technologies under deployment, the collaboration is very important, right? If I go to Shell, and as an example, not to quote any specific project, but if we go to companies like Shell, what we have to work together is when you build those next phase of your greenfield or build your revamping of your brownfield projects, how do you do that? By building them green. And what I mean is, if you come from this part of the world where we are sitting, especially I live in Gurgaon for the last few years, there are months of the year you can't breathe. So why we are talking this is why collaboration, and then come to some examples of collaboration, because you really need it for ensuring that we build while doing the right thing so that the planet is more sustainable. And that's why the story of efficiency is what Schneider does through his technology participation. Now, if you take examples, the example actually goes across the value chain. So when the energy goes from from the generation, from transmission to distribution to usage at industry, in homes, in data centers, there are multiple examples you can use it and deploy them to make them efficient. So let's take an example of just a basic grid. If the grid is going to be fed with more renewable energy, you need the stability, you need the resilience. By the way, we have one of the biggest and the most stable grids in the world. But when you will feed it more with the with the non-fossil, how do you ensure the demand response? So all that is again managed through what we can bring through technology piece. We're talking about discoms today. Discoms are somehow one-way feeding institutions. Can they become energy trading institutions? And that's where technology helps. And there are real examples in Delhi. Since I am not authorized to use the name, but we actually went for the peak demand management of homes, and actually one of the discoms could manage the full load management of homes by rooms and figure out how to manage the peak demand management of the load during summers, and then actually control it by 15% less, because where is the waste going. Now you can go to the level of an industry We eat our own kitchen. Out of the 31 plants, few of them are smart factories. One got recognized as Lighthouse Factory by World Economic Forum 2 times. Now, in this factory, because of this technology usage, we have delivered almost 20% plus energy efficiency. The carbon reduction is reduced by 60%. And then this is true for data centers. Now, it's not only true for industries. We have also examples in a small village where there is no power, there is wire, limited power, and by building a smart grid or a microgrid solutions in a village of 80 homes, these technologies can give them energy, can help them to run their small ancillary machines, so they become self-dependent because they can grow and harvest what they do, and they can bring it to the market. So the examples of technology helping finding energy efficiency as a solutions to make it sustainable while respecting the growth, and all this again is not done alone. To deploy them, you need partners, you need users, you need board members to approve those technologies so that the funding is secured. So again, I think as a bigger challenge, the community ecosystem helps. And why is it important is again coming back. The importance is because we don't want to build tomorrow which is going to be polluted or challenged to live. That's why the efficiency with the growth story is what we can do with technology, and that's what we do at the company. And there are multiple examples across sectors.
I find it interesting you bring up discoms in India. I think one of the areas in terms of the energy transition, one of the pain points sometimes is the discoms, investing in the grid and getting these companies up to speed and more advanced to create to use more advanced technologies and to help stabilize where we are. I mean, sorry, just taking a segue into this. Exactly how has it been working with discoms, and what can we do as a industry to help get them to where they need to be here in India?
So I don't want to say on behalf of the discom companies, but what we can as a technology provider, do they have challenges? Yes. Their biggest challenge is the losses. The losses are what they transmit and the theft. The smart metering project, which the government of India brought in under the RDSS scheme, we installed almost 2 million plus meters in that project. It's still under deployment. The losses have gone down, right? Now, of course, everything has the other side. One can always challenge the decision. If you were getting a freebie, you don't get that freebie because now you get what you use and you get monitored, right? But can we reduce the losses so the discoms can play a more profitable? Profitability, can they exist? Yes. Now, a discom, and as I said earlier, we've been seeing discoms supplying energy. As I said, if with the new government policy, when you're going to put 10 million homes with solar, the consumer will become a prosumer because he was going to produce energy, he's going to save the energy, and he will transmit the energy back to the grid. So the discom is going to play more of a technology platform because the users will start making money out of that energy. So we would use, but you also give it back, and you use when you are giving me at a low price. I give you back when I make money, right? The trading happens. So I think the shift of technology is going to happen. Are we there yet? Certainly not. But are we moving in that direction? And we have discussions happening around this. Yes. Little bit more with the private sector, little bit slower with the public sector, but I think success will drive success. The snowball effect will start, but we see success cases coming into those conversations.
Sorry, that is very interesting. Thank you for expanding on that. Charlie, let's go to you, CEO of the Global Impact Coalition. Can we just kind of talk about what you're hoping to achieve there, and some ways that you can kind of how your organization can accelerate innovation?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. So Global Impact Coalition is essentially founded by some of the leading chemical companies in the world, the BASFs, the SABICs of the world. Combined annual revenues is about $500 billion between all the companies. I think it will be probably more than $1 trillion by the end of this year. Really looking at when it comes to the crucial technologies that have a significant positive impact, what are the ways through a consortium approach that we can basically accelerate the adoption and the scalability, commercialization really of these technologies, then what, from a value chain perspective from within the chemical industry, what are the opportunities that offer a business case, but also a sustainability, a viable sustainability case. Maybe if I take a step back just to give an example to put this into context. So if you look at, obviously, chemical industry, it touches many different sectors, from automotive to home care to construction, electronics, and so on. If we look at the automotive sector as an example, what is the cost actually to have a fully decarbonized car? So there was also some studies done that we did with Boston Consulting Group on this. And it's actually not as much as you would think. So if we look at the average cost of a car out to 2030 is about $35,000. The cost for a fully decarbonized car to the end user, to the buyer, is $900. So that's less than 3%, right? And then if you think, okay, realistically, how long would it take to implement this if we were to drive this aggressively? 10 to 15 years, let's say, realistically. What's the inflationary cost of this year on year? It's about 0.2%. So actually the cost, and this, by the way, is representative across different sectors. So textiles or construction is a bit higher, it's about 5%. But generally, let's say to have net zero or decarbonized solutions or products, the net cost to the end user, to the buyer, is actually very low. So why is it not happening? It's not happening because whilst that might be let's say the additional cost at the end, actually, if you are operating as an intermediary, whether you're a steel producer or you're providing circular plastic for shampoo bottles or whatever the case may be, that's not your incremental cost. It's significantly higher, right? So for me, this is a very, very clear example, coming back a bit to the purpose of this panel is really around the collaboration side. That, for me, is a tangible example of why collaboration also across the value chain is really crucial if we are to meet some of these net zero circular goals, what have you. And this is a bit the focus of what we're working on. So we were actually, you had mentioned the World Economic Forum, we were actually incubated at the World Economic Forum. I was there previously, I was heading up low carbon ventures there. And this was really very important that we were able to have, when we look at the collaboration side, what are the key elements needed to actually collaborate on specific business opportunities or sustainability angles. And obviously there's the private, there's the financing piece, there's the policy piece, which all plays into this. But there are many different facets to this, but what we're really looking at is a cross collaboration for the chemical industry, but obviously the related value chain. So this also involves, of course, FMCG, retail, especially when it comes to circularity of polymers. But whether you're looking at decarbonization of processes, alternative carbon sources, whatever the case may be, it also has to be led from a commercial viability. There has to be a clear payback. And I think this is a bit the trend that we've sort of seen recently. I mean, if you look at sustainability teams in general over the last sort of 7, 8 years, whatever the case may be, they've generally seemed to operate in silos. Whereas I think the last sort of 2, maybe 3 years, there's a realization that actually these sustainability teams that are looking at sort of reporting and metrics and transparency, which are all very important, but they need to be integrated into the operations, but also the financial decision-making process of the company. And I think this is also a very important point. So this is essentially what we're doing. We're leading with what is the payback, what is the business opportunity, in order to then have a very clear, tangible sustainability case that can be put forward for companies for investment decision, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, we're based in Switzerland. I mean, in Europe, for example, for the chemical industry, balance sheets are, of course, shrinking. Companies are, in some cases, going really back to their core competencies. So there's an opportunity cost of free cash, right? Investable cash for companies. So then it's what are the key parameters that would be needed if we want to achieve this sustainability agenda? What is the business opportunity that will be able to get past, as you were saying, at board level, at CEO level, to actually drive tangible impacts?
Thank you for that. I think that might be a somewhat good segue to just jump over to Priyantha, Senior Director for Energy at the Asian Development Bank. Looking at ADB, how have you recognized the need for this kind of cross-sectoral collaboration to kind of push forward this rapid energy transition?
Right. Thank you, Steve, and good afternoon to all of you. It's glad to be here. In fact, I would like to break the question into probably two. One, of course, when it comes to our operations and dealing with our clients, how we look at this cross-sectoral collaboration. The second is, of course, internally within the organization, how we have addressed it in our own operations. To come to the first part of it, our energy sector operations is in fact more or less defined by our energy policy within the energy sector. And of course, among many other policies which the Asian Development Bank has, including safeguard policies, procurement policies, and so on, energy policy is critical when it comes to energy sector operations. So energy policy in 2021, somewhere around October, we got the new energy policy out. We were one of the first MDBs to look at energy transition very seriously in the policy itself, and we say we are not going to support any coal, for instance, for the first time. And so in that policy, we have 5 principles on which the policy is based. One of the, obviously, energy access, climate, environmental sustainability, sector governance, these are important principles. And the fourth, of course, regional cooperation, again, something which we have been talking about for many, many years. The last but not least is the recognition that the solutions will have to be cross-sectoral and to maximize the development impact. So that's for the first time in our policy we have recognized cross-sectoral collaboration as one of the principles. So that policy itself recognizes that. So that's important when it comes to moving forward. Then when it comes to internal organization, you may not know, sometimes about 1.5 years ago, ADB restructured its organization and we brought all the sector people together. Now, for instance, the energy sector led by me is all the energy guys in the sector, in the bank, are together under one roof. So we have a senior director, various directors looking after various regions, and then, of course, looking after different thematic core practice areas, energy transition being one of them. And with that, we brought in all the energy guys together, and then likewise, other sectors also together under one department. So you have 7 sectors sitting in one department, talking to each other, almost weekly, monthly basis, seeing what we can do in the countries. And in that model, we came up with 4 important shifts. We call it, one, the private sector shift, how we can get private sector financing as much as possible. As you know, the requirements in the energy sector is huge. You cannot basically finance it through public sector investments. You really need private sector, how to leverage private sector. So private sector shift, we are looking at it specifically. And then the climate shift, which is in fact the issue at hand, which we have to deal with. And the third is in fact the solutions shift. So for the first time, we are looking at providing a solution to a problem rather than trying to do an energy project. So which means naturally the solution involves not just energy. Energy is an input to solving a particular issue. So the solution shift basically brings us to collaboration in different sectors. It's a cross-sectoral project eventually. And the last but not least is, of course, new ways of working. How we ourselves should work to bring about this cross-sectoral intervention. So that's how internally we are organized, and we are obviously, it's not all done. We are in the transition stage. But we are basically looking at the solutions and how we can bring solutions as cross-sectoral interventions. So that's how we look at it. So energy sector is not something which can stand on its own naturally. It's an input to many other sectors. So it will have to be always a cross-sectoral solution you have to deal with when we deal with countries.
So I just want to expand on that. When you say you have a rule where you must be cross-sectoral, what does that look like in practice?
Now, for instance, I'll give you one example. We are now looking at a project in Maharashtra here, which is agriculture feeder solarization. Mm-hmm. Why we are looking at it? Because the solution we are looking at is, in fact, we would like to see the irrigation pumps solarized or bringing in solar energy to power irrigation pump is possible. But we know there are maybe investment issues in relation to the farmers. So how do we bring that investment, not directly dealing with the farmers, but that investment will have to come in, and the farmers will have to benefit from it, and the subsidies associated with it obviously comes from the associated the utilities or the sector or the government, state government, and we have to put together all this. So we are trying to bring this project so that the private investors can come into solar investments, and the government commits certain amount of money as subsidies and or gap financing for the investments, and the farmers eventually will get a subsidized tariff without burdening the utility in that sense, right? And whatever excess energy which is produced, when you don't need it for irrigation pumps, you pump it back to the system, and that brings a certain amount of revenue to the investors to cover their investment costs. So this is a typical cross-sectoral example which I can give. Of course, we have not yet started that project. We are in the process of preparing and taking that project through. It's almost $1 billion project. It's a resource-based loan, to tell you, which is what it means is that we don't go into details of procurement and who does what. We are looking at the government's overall plan in this intervention, and we pump in money up to $1 billion, if I can remember right, looking at the results. Look at the number of agricultural pumps installed, or in our case, we expect the transmission distribution to be strengthened. How many kilometers of distribution lines strengthened? Based on that, we disburse, let's say, 100 million, 200 million, and then another 200 million come along with more results coming in. So it's a results-based loan. So this is kind of cross-sectoral intervention we are looking at. That's just one example in India.
Thank you for that. I just want to jump back to Mansi really quick. I think when we're talking about these cross-sectoral partnerships and trying to get something moving, I can imagine there are still these hurdles and some difficulties that likely exist within the industry, within the government, and other places. Can you kind of walk through some of the difficulties that are still there and how you can get around them through working together with other companies and organizations?
Yeah, that's an outstanding question, Stephen. I think if it was that easy, we would have done so much more. But I think the challenges which we see is probably, I guess, misalignment of the objectives, sometimes misalignment in the interests, misalignment in the end output, and, a combination of them leads to some challenges on ground. Let me pick an example because I think that will bring it to life. In lubricants, which is one of the products which we sell in Shell, which goes to all the machines, there is an end-of-life part of the lubricant, which is, once it has been used, it's the waste oil. If it goes into land or water, it will be pretty bad. So I think the idea is that you collect it and ideally recycle it so that it becomes a virgin base oil to go back into your lubricants. That will be an ideal end state. Currently in India, less than 1% of the waste oil comes back into the virgin base oil. Yeah, so that's the problem statement, which is, how do we as players or as an industry work on it together so that ideally we are able to get 50-60% of that waste oil, which can actually, now we have the technology to make it a re-refined base oil and get it back into the as a virgin base oil. So very easy from a problem statement. Now, just imagine once we decide on that one, currently in India, there are close to 70,000 collection points from which you'll need to go to collect that. There are only 4 or 5 actual certified companies who can do that work. And then, there's a whole host of challenges from a point of view of, like, if you collect it through a certified agency, you'll have to pay 18% GST, versus if you give to an unauthorized person, you don't have to pay that money, right? And there is no clear policy on how much of re-refined oil needs to go back. So I guess once you start working on ground, you realize that you need the OEMs to come with you, you need the workshops to come with you, to partner with, you need the end consumer to be educated so that they don't burn it or throw it. because you're talking of tons and tons of these workshops. You need to build the capability of these collectors so that they are able to do it in the right manner. And then you need to work with the government to change some of the policies, taxations along with it. So that's the magnitude of the challenge. And I think it's, again, are we aligned to that single objective that we cannot get, the waste oil to go into our landmines or water? And I think once that larger objective gets set, you are able to then pull along and get all these players into the ducks aligned, basically. So I think over the last, for example, in India, Shell has been working with an OEM like Mahindra over their 34,000 sites to get that working with, and it's not one player, so like we have to identify 17 different players and building their capability, and then now we are working with the government to reduce some of the taxations along with it. So it's progressing well. Now we are able to collect at least 15% of what we are able to give to these workshops, but the journey and the task is mammoth ahead.
How do you collaborate? How do you, I mean, all those different folks and all those different stakeholders, how do you get aligned? Like, do you have to have a lot of meetings? Do you have to set up something on a whiteboard and kind of show them?
Yeah, it's again, ultimately it's lots of conversations, a lot of, I think, and I guess alignment. I think what I've seen typically is once the larger vision gets aligned and the economics on it, which is what is it in for each person, gets aligned, I think post that the thing starts moving very fast. Till the time those two are in different places, we keep going through hurdles and don't achieve our objective. But to your point, because they are so diversified, and in a market like India, it is so complex in terms of their ecosystem, education levels, capabilities, professionalism, what is it in for them? It just takes that much amount of effort, and that's why I think as we talk of net zero and we talk about the whole resilience along the way, these are some of the on-ground challenges which we as companies have to do it. But I think as long as our resolution is very strong that this has to be done, I think we'll be able to break all these barriers which come along the way.
That's excellent. Thank you. That's having the aligned vision is very important. And kind of looking at that, Deepak, going to you in your experience, when you're trying to, looking at things like the importance of energy efficiency and being aligned, are you able to, how do you get everyone kind of in the same boat in terms of showing the importance of energy efficiency, and what is your approach to that?
So again, I think the point comes back to the same point. It's not going to happen alone. So, for example, if I take just India as an example, and there has to be a cause, right? If I take the top 1,000 companies, I think all of us are now, by the regulation, we need to announce our scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, right? And there's a baseline. And then it becomes an obligation that we go back every year and tell our shareholders, how are you working on it? So that's a cause for one of for driver for the top 1,000 companies in the country. And then what happens is once you define your baseline, of course you need help to define those baselines. So there are companies around, including Schneider is one of them. We can consultancy and tell us what's the baseline. But then you start working on it. How do I reduce? Right? And then you break your problem by use cases. Is the consumption more in my building part, in my data center part, in my process part? Is I'm firing more gas or oil in a process? And that's where you start figuring out the possibilities, and then you roll out a plan, and then you solve by one. And again, technologies do exist today to make that happen. Now, this is one reason why a top 1,000 companies will do, because they need to to tell the shareholders the improvement plan. I take the example which was I was building early. There are people who have nothing, right? Let's go to a small district called Gumla in Jharkhand, so where we have powered irrigation pumps through solar. So their reason for coming together is because they're deprived of all that privilege we have in this part of the world. And there are so many. Yes, they have a wire and they have a voltage, but not enough sometimes. So what we create in those villages is a microgrid. And those microgrids power like a 40 kilowatt solar system. They power, they generate, and we power water pumps so that they can feed their irrigation. And then irrigation fields are now censored, so they can tell you what is the dampening of the water I need, and I'm done. Once you are done, you bring that power back through a microgrid which is built on an AI and intelligence. Then it transfers the energy for storage so it can use the energy in the night. But you still have enough energy. What do you do? So what we did in this particular Gumla district, 2 villages done through a microgrid AI driven, that then the energy shifts into a small ancillary unit where the women's are now running extrusion machines to get mustard oil from mustard, right? And then they are packaging it. They have a 3-wheeler which is run by auto, and they bring that product in the cooperative market 3 hours away so that they can sell it. So I think the driver of that need is what is important to define. Somebody is fighting to make it efficient processes governed by regulations to solve technologies. Ones are actually surviving to exist and getting the basic needs meet. And the beauty is technologies do exist for all of them. Right? They just need to be defined in a use case. And then we can talk about smart homes, right? I mean, the homes where we live, most of our homes today, the new built, are having some sort of an automation, which means you do an energy management by an usage, and you can then define, am I overusing, underusing? And then you can build a full dashboard of saying which particular apartment is using more or which particular room is using more. This is not home. You can go to an example like in a refinery like ADNOC, with their multi-platforms, offshore, onshore. We have examples where we bring all those data on a screen, and then we can evaluate what is the efficiency. So I think the usage of technology to get the efficiency out are all proven cases. The trigger is sometimes regulations, sometimes it's basic survival, sometimes it's all about proving that I can do better than I did my past. And I think these multiple triggers are helping us to deploy those technology for a usage of better tomorrow. And at the end, I come back to my first point. We don't want to build an ecosystem of growth which will compromise future so that you can't breathe. An example is the city I live, and I'm sure we want to avoid that. So there are multiple threads which gives you that kick or reason to build use this technology more smartly.
Thank you for that. And we're talking about all these technologies. Charlie, I want to throw one to you. When we're talking about these technologies and we're talking about these projects and we're talking about things that are very ambitious, what does it take to make these also economically viable?
I mean, maybe I just come back on the barriers as well. I mean, it's a bit linked to your question. And this is something that became quite evident when I was at the World Economic Forum, where you obviously sort of a very big public-private platform, especially in Europe. There's actually a lot more government funds that have been allocated and earmarked towards these sort of decarbonization, green build projects than there are actually investable cases from their perspective. So there's almost a surplus of capital that is going around that is just not finding, for whatever reason, the right home. I think it's a bit different if you look, I mean, the US maybe is a bit of a question mark now, but if you look at Middle East in general, Saudi, Abu Dhabi, UAE really, but and obviously India, it seems to be a lot more efficient in terms of capital allocation for projects that really need to be. So I think one of the barriers really is definitely finding capital that's been earmarked, whether that's sort of first loss, whether that's sort of catalyst funding, whatever you want to call it. It's not finding the right home. And again, I think it's also around sort of the misalignment, let's say, of interest and priorities. I think one of we mentioned sort of end-of-life oil. I think from maybe an interesting example, if we look at end-of-life vehicles, because this is something that we're looking at now, maybe, India is, I think, 4th largest car producer in the world, so maybe it's also a bit topical here. End-of-life vehicles are not really set up for circularity, at least on the plastic side. So there are more than 50 plastic fractions in any one car. Pretty much all of this gets put into landfill, right? So the car gets scrapped, and then basically the plastic is burnt or put in the ground. why is that? It's really because there hasn't really been any incentive or business case to justify anything different. So again, just to put sort of one tangible example to what we're doing at Global Impact Coalition, between various companies of GIC, there's actually demand for 100% of this plastic fraction. So then it actually creates an interesting business case, interesting partnership structure with the sorters, the dismantlers, the shredders, and then the OEMs, of course. Again, in Europe, there's new regulation coming in with X amount of sort of closed loop plastic that needs to be in new cars. So again, very, very topical, and I think a good example also as to the sorts of maybe larger, heavy infrastructure projects that we need all this alignment on that you were talking about, but it's really, really crucial that there's also platforms that allow this to happen, and it doesn't just sort of expect to sort of appear, but there's a clear enabler, there's a clear accelerator base that can house and sort of build up all these different projects.
Thank you. And I think we're running out of time. I don't have the monitor anymore, but I think we still have enough time for at least one more question. And going on that theme of challenges, Priyantha, can I just ask within your organization, what are the challenges that you've faced, and in cases particularly with like borrowers when looking for cross-sectoral collaboration, can you kind of expand on that and give an example?
Actually, one of the biggest challenges we have is with the borrowers, because if it is a multi-sector project, you have to deal with many agencies at the borrower level. And in fact, coordination among those institutions at that level is very, very low, I must tell you. That's the biggest challenge we have when it comes to cross-sectoral projects. Internally, obviously, then the borrower has a responsibility, maybe the finance ministry, maybe the planning commission will have a major role to play in that. But when it comes to nitty-gritty and on-the-ground implementation, we always face that challenge. That's the biggest issue. Internally, of course, as I said, we are now organized in such a way that more and more cross-sectoral work can be more easily accommodated. But still, now I am an energy specialist, and I have water specialists, we have finance specialists in different sectors. They have their own targets. They have their own targets in their own spheres. And then when it comes to cross-sectoral projects, probably they have less of an interest to go ahead with cross-sectoral projects because they have their own specific projects to deal with and limited financing in that, and they move forward. They prefer to do that. But of course, now in the new model, we are trying hard to bring in these what we call 1 ADB groups, where all these different sectors can work together. And of course, one of them or two of them may have to lead it, but that's still in the transition. It is a challenge because an energy sector working with a finance guy may not be that easy sometimes when it comes to working. So those are internal issues which we can still deal with. But the borrower side is the most difficult one because they have their own inertia, the momentum. It's very difficult to dismantle it that easily. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we've got a few minutes left. I would just, as a closing thought from each of you to just kind of put an end to this and give your view on cross sectoral collaboration and the challenges that you face. Can I just quickly go maybe just give a 30-second conclusion? Mansi, can we start with you?
Yeah, I think having a strong conviction, common goal, and then solve for the barriers, and we'll come to the solution.
It's fantastic. And Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of stole what I was going to say. But no, I mean, I think also being able to look at maybe more unconventional partnerships is important. And I think on the financing side as well, what we've definitely learned as a group of companies who are trying to make a difference is actually when you're looking at third-party financing, it's very important for these sorts of projects that are maybe a bit more risky. The right financing people are brought along very early into the project and not sort of at the last minute. So I think that's also when we're looking at maybe alleviating some of the barriers and getting some of these crucial projects off the ground. I think that very, very early stage involvement with the financing, with the right financing community is also very important.
That is indeed. Thank you. And Deepak, can you?
So my few words would be hope. I think we can solve it. We can do it. Let's do it now. And let's not promise to look forward for the best solution today. Let's come together and build one, because we have technology bricks and problem statements which can be solved, and technology is scalable. That's the beauty. So even if we don't be perfect on day one, we promise it will be day two will be better than day one. So let's try, let's hope for the positive. Let's put our effort now instead of waiting for others to do it for us. And I'm sure we'll build tomorrow, which is going to be better from today. But let's act.
Thank you. And Priyantha, any closing thoughts?
Right. I think we have to look at everything as a problem needing a solution, rather than trying to come up with a sector-related intervention. It's a solution which needs various sectors to come in. So you have to look at it from that viewpoint.
And we're out of time. My last thought on this, if I can, is I think how Mansi opened this, we can't do this on our own. I think that's the main theme that I've seen of this. The vision must always be there. And whether that's a vision of energy efficiency, whether that's a vision of energy transition, or finding innovative solutions for tomorrow, it can't be done unless these sectors work together in finding a way over these sometimes very difficult hurdles. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and thank you, everyone, all the panelists here.
Thank you.